A Riddle in the Middle of the Way by Dr. Alon Giladi.
On the new old worship of God from a faithful, logical perspective. Between subjective religions to the universal religion.
The one claiming that the faith for its own sake, lishma, is a canonical, practical acceptance of the yoke of Torah and commandments, according to a halakha that is not faithful logical, preaches, unfortunately, in practice, to idol worship, avodat elilim. The absurdity in the central claim of the formal Leibowitz is situated before our eyes, and specifically because of this, it is not to be wondered that no one conceived to raise it in the simplest manner, and this beyond the rational critique in this matter of Kant. The canonization of the faith, due to the desire for its objectification, according to an interpretation regarding which there is no doubt in the eyes of the preacher or the claimant, that it was not done in a rational intellectual way, given to refutation, obligates a sharp conclusion requiring its refutation. When a man worships the statue, or the picture, or the land, or the money, or the state, or any other material is, yesh, behold, he is necessarily an idol worshipper. The elevation of an interpretation that is not theoretical exemplary, that is not faithful logical, of the 613 commandments to the level of the essence of the faith, and more so, to the level of the faith itself, by means of the realization of this interpretation, it is itself a faith in matter, although of a different type. And what difference does it make, ma nafshach, if the matter is wood, or a picture, or a star, or words, which were created by matter, human or not? In this matter, it is very interesting to refer to Maimonides. Know that our avoidance of advocating for the eternity of the world is not because of what is written in the Torah that the world is created, renewed. For the scriptures pointing to the creation of the world are not more numerous than the scriptures pointing to the God being a body. And perhaps it would have been much easier, and we would have had a greater ability to interpret those scriptures and to prove the eternity of the world. Rather, two reasons caused us not to do this and not to believe in this. One, that the God being not a body was proven by an exemplary proof. The second reason is that our faith that the God is not a body does not destroy for us anything from the foundations of the Torah, and does not deny any claim of a prophet, and there is in it nothing but what the ignorant claim that there is in this a contradiction to the Scripture. And this is not a contradiction, as we clarified, but it is the intention of the Scripture.
The faith of truth cannot be the worship of the text as itself, and also not the worship of the interpretation of the text as itself, which is because of this not faithful logical, whatever the intention standing behind the things may be. The religion of truth cannot be a worship of the products of the interpretation of the text as themselves, but it is, by its very definition, a process ceaseless and infinite of discovery, by means of exemplary refutation of the effort for the worship of the undefined God and action according to it, until its refutation and so forth. A process which is the supreme and continuous peak of the thought of man. This is indeed the acceptance of the yoke of Torah and commandments. But this yoke is not the yoke of words as a canon, nor of a non-rational interpretation of them, but the yoke of the conceptual, practical search, ceaseless, for the truth unachievable forever. This is the acceptance of the yoke of Torah and commandments within the framework of a faith of truth, which is in practice a practical acceptance of the yoke of the faithful logical thought about the worthy laws and judgments and commandments, according to the word of the supreme faithful logical thought, or in the language of men, the true divine revelation.
This yoke includes both the faithful logical interpretation of the scriptures, claiming divine revelation, and at their head the Torah in its research essence that is beyond the language of men, and both the aspiration for a faithful logical revelation as itself, the rational, eternal aspiration for the faithful logical prophecy. The faithful logic is therefore a faithful logical revelation, a constant faithful logical interpretation of the claimed revelation, and practical conclusions required beside them, in the paths of the logical truth. It is noticed and clear that the thought in general and the faithful logical thought in particular are in their essence interpretation. The science, the morality, the faith, all of them are interpretations. Interpretation of the nature, of the human nature, of the essence, havaya, of the trail, shavalo, of the one God. The essential question is, what is the interpretation situated in the paths of the truth? What is the exemplary interpretation for the objects of the faithful reason, and what are its conclusions? The true halakha, the faithful logical halakha, is necessarily a universal halakha, and is given to constant exemplary refutation by rational tools alone, from within experience upon a faithful logical a priori rational substrate. This is the exemplary and constant rational halakha, learned by each and every one of us, without any mediator, tyrant, or false messiah, except the reason in its faithful logical dimension designing the religion of truth, within the boundaries of the faithful logic. This is the interpretation most difficult and supreme of all, the faithful logical interpretation, regarding the worthy relation between man to the essence, havaya, between man to the undefined God. This interpretation of the worthy relation between man to the inclusive essence, meaning the undefined God, is carried out at its beginning by means of a theoretical scientific perception of the senses upon a rational a priori substrate, and by means of extracting the moral laws from within a balance between the individual and the collective, the essence of the is, havayat hayesh, upon a moral a priori substrate. At the same time, this interpretation is carried out from within a discovery of the divine law, which is in its essence all the previous interpretations of the nature and the worthy relation of man facing the world of the is, with the addition of the laws revealed from the God's trail, shavalo, in the boundaries of the is, upon an a priori, faithful logical substrate. As was noted in the previous chapter, it is noticed and clear that the discovery of the worthy relation between man to the essence is in a recognition-based manner a matter most complicated by its very definition, as a relation between man to the undefined, including the entirety of the other relations, given to the research of man in the world of the is. Therefore, it is only natural that from the perspective of man, the discovery of this relation sometimes wears a form of divine revelation, while in practice we deal with a similar thought process, although more supreme in its true dimension in relation to the other thought processes. At the same time, the relation situated in the paths of the truth, between man to the God, is forever an integration between that same fundamental divine revelation to its constant, faithful logical interpretation, expressed in thought and in action as one. The faithful logical worship of God is designed, therefore, by means of a faithful logical sensory perception upon the theoretical and moral a priori substrates, with the addition of the faithful logical a priori substrate. The true halakha is therefore a constant process of a faithful logical experiment, a process of contemplation and refutation, given to each and every one of us as human beings at every time, at every place, whatever may be our historical, subjective affiliations and faiths. This is a process that does not need subjective mediators, except for the mediation of the faithful logical thought in the way of the exemplary proof, and of the worthy action derived from it. And more so, this process, according to the essential Leibowitz, is the ultimate purpose of the existence of man, since it is it, and no other, sustains the status of man before the God, within the boundaries of the faithful logical truth. Accordingly, necessarily, arise the need and the necessity for the design of the halakha of truth, within whose framework one must act necessarily, also for the correction of the existing halachot, laws, in all the monotheistic faiths, and all this in an exemplary and ceaseless manner. This correction is not required in order to change the historical faiths, which are themselves indeed the fruit of the subjective decision of the believer, and this since the halachot upon which they are based did not develop by definition in a faithful logical manner. The faithful logical correction is required for the discovery of the universal religion, the religion of truth according to the halakha of truth, which by definition forever will not be achieved in its fullness. A religion of truth that is the fruit of faithful logical revelation and constant faithful logical halakha given to constant refutation, and therefore its existing presence is it the universal religion with a capital R, Behe Hayediyah. The striving for the religion of truth by means of the halakha of truth obligates necessarily a supreme free thought, devoid of any anti-rational limitations, historical and specific, out of an aspiration for absolute free will, for the recognition of the undefined God, which forever will not be achieved in its fullness. A direct result of this is that every coercion within the framework of this process acts necessarily against it and is opposed to it, and in a parallel manner, every avoidance of providing conditions enabling the autonomy and the action of the supreme free thought, also it acts against this process. Therefore, the separation of the religion from the state in the aspects of mechanisms of thought coercion is a distinct and fundamental faithful logical need, implanted in the ultimate purpose of the striving for the universal religion of truth. The separation of the religion from the state in the dimensions of coercion in it does not constitute, from a faithful logical perspective, a goal as itself due to such or another humanistic value, such as the value of freedom, but it is a worthy matter resulting in a faithful logical manner from the striving for the religion of truth, including within it both the theoretical reason and the moral reason. At the same time, the faithful logic obligates supreme freedom of thought, and therefore necessarily a possibility, an opportunity, for free research of the first degree in the field of nature, morality, and faith. This research requires necessarily also a proactive public possibility of research conditions, material, moral, and faithful as one, and even more so in the moral and faithful field, which are in their essence for their own sake, lishma, and not for any material utility. For the purpose of the study of the Torah and the morality, there is a need for both bread and freedom. Therefore, every institutional mechanism enabling conditions of matter, morality, and faith as a substrate for supreme, free, faithful logical research for the entire public, and especially for the lower and middle classes in it, from a socio-economic perspective, is from a faithful logical perspective a worthy mechanism. In contrast, every mechanism which does not enable such freedom, and even burdens it and distances it, is not worthy by definition from a faithful logical perspective, or worthy in a diminished manner, in relation to the injury to the faithful logical research. The research institutions in the modern society are characterized, similar to the value practical essence of the society, by enslavement both to the matter and to the capital. And in contrast, the special institutions for the specific faiths are characterized, in generalization, in a manner that is not logical and does not encourage the free and supreme thought. Accordingly, the scientific research institutions are channeled in their majority in practice to the deepening of the rule of capital and the pursuit after the matter. And in contrast, the moral and faithful logical research institutions are not to be found, to say the least, at their peak, how much more so in a built-in manner. This matter requires a fundamental correction from a faithful logical perspective, including an action of the collective, for the existence of a research infrastructure for the sake of the free research of the individual, not only in the fields of the scientific research connected necessarily also to the matter, but also and mainly in the fields of the morality and the faithful logic. This infrastructure will balance between the material and conceptual difficulty of the individual, to require to the moral and faithful logical research, to the supreme necessity in freedom of the highest degree for the existence of such research. Since the true faithful discovery is identical in its essence to the scientific and moral discovery, although complex and superior to it, behold all those who sought to bind it to the identity of its authors, or to such or another material dimension, such as the existence of such or another building, and such like matters that are not from the field of the exemplary proof, erred a grave error, although human, so very human. It is to be assumed that the source of the faithful logical error of all those who discuss the religion and sought to separate it from the reason is, among other things, in their personal sources and histories of its thinkers, such as Spinoza, Kant, Nietzsche, and Leibowitz. But to these sources there is no faithful logical importance, just as there is no faithful logical importance to the research of the personal reasons and intentions of the possessors of the divine revelation and its interpreters. The foundations of the faithful logical religion are implanted in the discovery of the truth, which is the object of the discovery, and not in the motives of the discoverers or in their histories as themselves. Accordingly, there is no matter from a faithful logical perspective in the identity of the writers of the text, the timing of its writing, the reason for its writing, the quantity of the writers, the place of the writing, and such like. All these are devoid of faithful logical importance. Just as the truth is situated in the simple things, so also the error is situated in them, and so also the error upon the error, and such like. From the time that there exists the understanding that the religion of truth includes the laws of the scientific relation between the materials, the laws of the worthy relation between man to the materials, and the laws of the worthy relation between man to the undefined essence, is resolved in an essential manner the error standing at the basis of the distinction between what is worthy to what is existing, between what is coerced upon man and what is decided by him. Behold, therefore, this religion strives for truth. The truth is a lamp to its feet, without such or another subjective partiality, without such or another imaginary and corporeal deviation, without any obligation whatsoever except the treading in the paths of the truth. The faithful logic is therefore necessarily a faith for its own sake, lishma, including the science of truth, the morality of truth, and the faith of truth, which exist without connection to any utility, a matter coinciding in its full strength and necessarily also with their being unachievable by definition. Its supreme and universal essence of the faithful logic teaches with emphasis that it cannot be achieved in its fullness, and it is doubtful even if in approximation. In practice, we deal with a constant thought-faithful process, in a difficult and ceaseless ascent in the faithful logical ladder, which is the ultimate purpose of man, which forever will not be achieved. The decision of the relative free will, which is the free will from the perspective of man, meaning, a decision regarding the moral or faithful action, is the subjective free decision apparently of man, as I showed. But what is worthy to be done, the true value, the true religion, are a matter learned in an objective manner given to refutation, which is as itself, by definition, unachievable. The decision of man regarding the acceptance of the yoke of Torah and commandments as they developed according to the Jewish halakha, or according to any other specific religion, or historical faith as its definition by Kant, according to its specific development, is indeed the subjective decision of man according to his relative free will. So also the choice of man in such or another value is his subjective free choice, apparently, and free from his perspective in a relative manner in practice. But the truth about its objects, the scientific, the moral, and the faithful, is one and one alone. This truth is given only to universal discovery, in which the component of the human will does not exist at all in it as itself, but only in the process of its discovery and the custom acting according to it. In the previous chapter, I clarified that the foundations of the faithful logic are situated in the discovery of the worthy relation between man to the essence, Havaya, including the theoretical relation between the materials, the science, the worthy relation between man to the materials, the morality, and the worthy relation between man to the essence, including the relation to the undefined God, the faith. Thus, I required to the fact that the worthy relation between man to the essence, and within this to the undefined, is most complex, and therefore is sometimes appearing by man as a divine revelation, although in an essential manner we deal with an interpretation of the is, yesh, and of the relation to the undefined, in the boundaries of the is, whose truth is examined in the manner of a faithful logical interpretation, whose essence I clarify in a primary manner in this chapter. As I explained above, the volitional action of a search after the connection with the God, including the worship of the God, is from the perspective of man an action of his free will, and from the perspective of the formal Leibowitz, it is the creation of the connection of man with the God. But from a faithful logical perspective, the decision regarding the faithful logical worship of the God is the action of the relative free will, which is, in an essential manner, part of the absolute free will of the undefined God. The climbing in the ladder toward the faithful logic, in the paths of the unachievable truth, is in the essence of the things the creation of the connection of the undefined God with man, and not the opposite. This is that same apparent individual providence, hashgacha pratit, according to Maimonides, who identified the direct connection, the direct relation, between the essence of this providence to the level of the faithful logical achievement of the thinking and the believing man as one. The true divine revelation is the peak of a faithful logical process, which is, in its essence, an approach to the absolute free will, constituting in practice a supreme part of its undefined essence. From here, that to be distinguished from Kant, who does not explain sufficiently the reason for the rational need in the requiring to the Holy Scriptures, and views them as a historical fact requiring a relation and nothing more. I am of the opinion that every requiring to the relation to the undefined God requires a faithful logical interpretation for the examination of its truth, from the very being it a requiring to this relation, which is a built-in part of the faithful logical connection with the God, whether it is seen by man in its source as a divine revelation or whether not. How much more so is it worthy to require a faithful logical interpretation of the Holy Scriptures of the specific monotheistic religions, discussing the relation to the undefined God in a claimed manner of divine revelation. This faithful logical interpretation is the way to a constant discovery of the laws of the worthy relation of man facing the essence, Havaya, of the ultimate purpose of man, according to the essential Leibowitz,
of the worship of God by man. I have already clarified previously that the Christianity and the Islam, like the Judaism, are in their foundation interpretations of claimed divine revelations, at whose basis stands, as said, the Book of the Torah. The Christian and Islamic halachot, laws and sects, are in their foundation interpretations of the Quran, and of the New Testament, and correspondingly the Old Testament as the nickname of the Bible situated at their basis, and the Torah situated at its basis. In their foundation, the Christianity and the Islam seek to discover the general, universal religious law by means of specific faiths from different points of view: Jewish, Roman, Greek, Arabic, and more. The universal argument serves as a foundation for the aspiration of their global dissemination, as well as for the checking of their specific arguments in relation to their foundations. Also, the Jewish halakha, in its shades and generations, as well as the various Jewish sects, are in practice an interpretation of the fundamental book of the foundation of faith in the undefined God, in the I am that I am, Eye Asher Eye, meaning the book of the Torah. These and those are human creations of great importance that cannot be overvalued. For the thought development, the faithful and the moral of man, these and those are required of a faithful logical correction. The development of all the monotheistic religions, as well as the development of the theory of wisdom, teach, as I showed at the opening of this composition, on a continuous failure and degeneration, patch upon patch, whose basis is in a fundamentally erroneous disconnection of the faith and the morality from the exemplary logical thought. False imaginations, mysticism, spirituality, exploitation, corruption, idol worship, religions without God and without morality, together with the modern objective achievements of the science of matter, and a danger to the very existence of man. All these are the clear results of the disconnection of the morality and the religion from the paths of the truth for its own sake, lishma, and how much more so the distancing and the ignorance of the rational thought from their necessary existence, at the same time with the deepening in the sciences of matter. The faithful logic seeks to correct this erroneous situation, and this while a free thought observation into the past, taking its achievements, understanding its errors, and drawing faithful logical conclusions in the difficult and necessary ascent in the stages of the ladder of truth. Accordingly, it is worthy to it, the faithful logical observation, as far as it gives its mind to the past, to require also to the thought of Maimonides, who is without any doubt the herald of the faithful logic, the Jewish and the general as one, with the philosophical faithful tools that were in his hand in his time. This observation, like every faithful logical observation, is forever an act of interpretation in an exemplary manner, and is never in the aspect of we will do and we will hear, Naaseh v'nishma, which is, as I clarified above, a fundamental but only primary stage in the internal and global development of the faith of the unity, monotheism. At the same time, it is worthy within the framework of this process to observe in a critical manner also the thought of Avicenna and Averroes in the Islam, Augustine and Thomas Aquinas in the Christianity, who are the heralds of the specific faithful logic of each and every one of their specific monotheistic faiths. The greatness of Maimonides versus the others within the Judaism, such as Judah Halevi, and outside of it, which the essential Leibowitz continues, is in the news of the faithful logical correction in the middle of the way of before and after Kant, in a rational manner alone, negating mysticism, secret, esotericism, and corporeality, gashmiut, altogether. A similar greatness, parallel but erroneous, is situated with Augustine and Thomas Aquinas on one hand, and Avicenna on the other,
except for the aspects of mysticism and/or the requiring to what is beyond the world of the is, olam hayesh, and to what is beyond the boundaries of the rational recognition, with an important note that it seems that Averroes is also clean from aspects of mysticism, with all its implications. The great and decisive difference between the heralds of the faithful logic in Christianity and Islam, except perhaps Averroes, versus Maimonides, is both in the basis of the things and in their result. Regarding the basis of the things, Avicenna on one hand, and Augustine and Thomas Aquinas on the other, seek to bridge between Islam and Christianity, respectively, to the Aristotelian and Platonic theories of wisdom, which were perceived in their eyes as the basis for the theory of the intellect wisdom. But in the course of the recognition of these great and important thinkers, of the undefined God who is beyond the reason of man, they fall in a manner so human intellectual into the rational obstacle of the existence of the non-rational, mystical, irrational connection between the God and man. When the great Avicenna analyzes the rational foundations of the Quran, he naturally reaches the understanding that the undefined obligates a connection with it, which is a revelation that is beyond the reason. A similar thought development is revealed from his perspective in the issue of the eternal soul itself, even after death, versus the decaying body. A similar conclusion we draw from the thought of the great Thomas Aquinas and Augustine who preceded him, when despite amazing researches of confessions, of questions and answers against them, and answers against the answers, they are not capable of avoiding the mysticism, from the deviation from the field of the is, all of which is in the essence of things necessarily corporeality, gashmiut, and idol worship. We deal with a natural but essential error, constituting a clear opening for idol worship, corporeality, and deviation from the path of the universal faith, the faithful logical. The essential reason for this failure is, among other things, the absence of rational tools for their time, and an erroneous requiring to beyond the boundaries between the is and the undefined, which caused an erroneous leakage into the field, which by definition is not given to man. The faithful logical breakthrough of Maimonides, which was also carried out without the tools outlined by Kant, negates in its essence completely the mysticism and the corporeality, although it is not entirely free of them in certain aspects. This difference between the heralds of the faithful logic in the various monotheistic religions is not exhausted only in the bases of things, but also in their interpretive result standing at the essence of the faithful logic and its implications for the worthy reference to the Holy Scriptures. To be distinguished from other thinkers like Spinoza from here and Luther from there, the interpretive position of Maimonides in relation to the Torah, standing at the basis of the collective of the monotheistic faiths, is not an interpretation of the literal sense, pishat, but of a rational homiletic sense, darash, striving for the exemplary. This is an interpretation reminding us of the way of the science, but in faith, an observation of what human beings see, in the speech of the divine revelation in the language of men, out of a rational understanding simple and deep, as one that we deal with a word fitly spoken, davar davur al ofnav, which must be understood after deep exemplary thought. The faithful logical continuation of the breakthrough of Maimonides appears in practice in the systematic Kant and the esoteric Leibowitz, who enable, by means of their refutation, the advanced completion of the original faithful logic, in which Maimonides opened. When the formal Leibowitz claims that the worship of God is the acceptance of the yoke of Torah and commandments, he is erroneous and correct together. Since the Torah of truth is forever a ceaseless, faithful logical halacha interpretation of the objects of the faithful reality, including what is perceived by man as divine revelation, and at whose head and foundation stands the book of the Torah.
On the New Old Halakha.
In the basis of the matter, it can be seen that the composition before you leads necessarily to the need for the discovery of a new halakha, or more precisely, a new old one. In all the monotheistic religions, this halakha will constitute in its basis a new old interpretation of the written book of the Torah. The new old oral Torah as an exemplary, faithful logical interpretation of the fundamental divine revelation, which is the written Torah, standing as a claimed divine revelation at the basis of the collective of the monotheistic faiths. In the basis of things, both the theoretical scientific reason, both the morality reason, and both the faithful reason stand or fall upon the interpretation. We interpret the perception of our senses upon the a priori substrate situated in us, regarding the nature and its research, regarding the worthy custom for the free man toward the matter, and above them in an inclusive manner containing them, regarding the worthy custom for the free man toward the God. Our research and our aspiration to understand the worthy relation toward the God and our action according to it in a faithful, logical manner are therefore the worship of God. This research and this action have their basis in the understanding that our matter is in the connection given to our understanding as part of the world of the is, between the undefined to the world of the is. Accordingly, it is clear from within it, mene uve, that this research is not required at all for the definition of the God himself, who is outside of our understanding and the capability of our understanding, and its matter is solely in his trail, shovalo, situated for our observation in the world of the is, of which we are part, and which our intellect is given to us in order to understand it, within the limits of the intellect. This research occupies itself, therefore, with the connection with the God, out of an aspiration to approach the undefined God, whose supreme and unachievable forever expression reaches until the boundaries of our rational material world and the world of the God, but never crosses this boundary. This boundary is hidden and revealed before us, and its research, by definition, does not require and even negates institutions and mediators on their behalf, since by definition it is given to the research of our thought and to constant refutation from the very being it occupied, with the known connection with the unknown, until its possible extremity for the recognition of man. This is a thought and practical matter of the first degree, which precisely because of this was not developed in a rational, systematic manner, and was abandoned over the generations, since the mind of the sages of the past and the present was not dedicated in a real manner to its simple foundations, to the thought that was required for it, upon its errors in the basis of things, to its refutation and to the conclusions required from this refutation. And this due to the natural wall high and immense of the paths of error in the tradition of the morality and the faith as one, and at the same time the erroneous self-nullification before the scientific wisdom. From the time that a man recognizes a field beyond the reason, in a God who is undefined and unachievable, who is, I am that I am, Ehyeh asher ehyeh, who includes past, present, and future, behold, man cannot require even to a jot of his essence. On the other hand, from the time that we act in an exemplary manner, in the understanding of the connection with the undefined God, expressed in a supreme way in the inclusive thought of man, the scientific, moral, and faithful as one, we can remove the non-rational foundations in a careful and exemplary treading in the paths of this supreme connection. This is indeed always the interpretation, both regarding the connection between the science to the morality, both in the connection between the morality to the faith, and both regarding the understanding of the faith itself in the paths of the truth.
a faithful, logical approach out of a distancing from any hint of mysticism and from any crossing of the boundary of the rational recognition in the interpretation of the scriptures of the monotheistic faiths, is situated in a primary manner requiring modern development, with Maimonides, as I showed also from within the error of his negative student, Spinoza. The faithful logical interpretation obligates by definition the preservation of everything stated in the founding text, without detracting, even of a jot from it, just as we are not permitted to detract even a jot from the reality which we approach to research in a scientific or moral manner. Everything situated in this world has its foundation in the undefined, and everything situated in this world aspires to it, whether in a simple material manner or whether in a complex material manner, which is in its supreme expression our thought, which is in its practical expression our action according to our relative free will, to reach the undefined God. We aspire to reach a starting point, to the essence of all things. We want to reach the supreme expression of the absolute free will, to the moment of the creation and to the essence that preceded it. We seek to return to the conceptual and material Eden of our essence, which is forever, by definition, not given to us, nor will it be given to us. This aspiration is expressed in a supreme manner in the faithful rational research, including the research of the world of the East, Yesh, and the research of the connection between the world of the East to what is beyond it, the worship of God. This research is necessarily a conceptual practical research of the claims of the divine revelation by means of a rational homiletic sense, darash, faithful logical. This is a research of what is worthy to be, from the perspective of the action of man in the world of the is, whose foundation is in the supreme faithful logical discovery appearing as a divine revelation, and its continuation in a constant faithful logical checking of its meaning and of the faithful logical laws revealed from it. The faithful logical inquiry does not distinguish from the beginning between different claims of divine revelation. On the contrary, it is required for a faithful logical examination of all the claims of revelation wherever they are, and all their expressions, and first and foremost those which were recognized by parts of the humanity as holy scriptures of the specific faiths. Man is close to himself, prefers his own. But as noted above, it can be determined that at the basis of the expressions of revelation of their kinds in relation to the one God stands, according to what is said in them themselves, literal sense, peshat, and homiletic sense, darash, as one, the Torah, and I emphasize the Torah. We must require to a faithful logical interpretation of the Torah, checking in an exemplary manner the rational darash revealed from it, after a faithful logical research in relation to the worthy custom in the essence, havaya. This is a rational exemplary darash of the 5 books of the Torah, by means of the discovery of the universal laws and commandments and judgments situated in the Torah in a manner given to refutation, in a manner seeking constant refutation. This is a constant research, which is necessarily, by the very being it rational faithful, embodies within it the theoretical, the moral, and the faithful reason together and separately. This is a faithful logical research examining the entirety of the halachot and the specific faiths that came to our world after the Torah in an identical manner. The discovery of the laws revealed from them by means of examining their durability in relation to the laws of science, morality, and the faithful logical a priori substrate. This is the faithful logic, striving for the divine Torah, renewing and existing in a constant manner from the perspective of man, and its supreme and infinite discovery given to rational efforts which forever will not reach exhaustion, of each and every one of us. The need for such a dramatic correction is situated in the view of Leibowitz regarding the ultimate purpose of man, as an effort for the worship of God, as the status of man before the God, which I established above in a rational manner. According to the formal Leibowitz,
This ultimate purpose is sustained by means of the acceptance of the yoke of the 613 commandments, according to the interpretation of the Jewish halakha. In contrast, according to the refutation of this position, this ultimate purpose is situated by means of the acceptance of the yoke of Torah and commandments learned in a ceaseless, faithful logical manner by each and every one of us. The halakha of truth, the religion of truth, revealed at every time by means of the reason alone, by each and every one of us, as the words of Leibowitz close to the time of his passing. The true religion is, according to the formal taste of Leibowitz, the faithful act which is the fulfillment of 613 commandments. By means of the faithful act, by means of the avoidance of lighting a cigarette on Shabbat, man disconnects from his material, natural need and creates in his, Leibowitz's opinion, a connection with God. The ultimate purpose of man, every man, in the opinion of Leibowitz, is in the worship of God, obedience to the claim of Spinoza, or duty in the language of Kant, done by means of a volitional subjective decision toward the fulfillment of the canonical halakha. This is the faith for its own sake, lishma, according to the formal Leibowitz, which apparently, on the face of things, has none besides it. This is, if so, a faith whose foundation is practical, which is given to the mediation of experts, decisors, poskim, a matter contradicting from within it, minei uve, the essential Leibowitz. This is a failing formal attempt for the objectification of the faith, which must be corrected from its foundation. This is an attempt for a canonical objectification of the faith, while claiming formally that we must decide subjectively to fulfill the instructions of experts decisors regarding the worthy interpretation of the divine revelation in the Torah. The new old halakha is therefore in practice a challenge to the existing halakha, following the conceptual, practical, faithful logical challenge of Maimonides upon the halakha which existed in his days, with required changes. The objectification of the religion can and must be done solely by means of the research of the objects of the faith upon a faithful logical a priori substrate, which is necessarily a research required for an exemplary proof, and not for blind obedience after the non-rational decisors of the generation, and not even after the rational greats of the generation, as rational as they were and will yet be. By means of this rational free research, we must discover the laws concerning the worthy relation between man to the essence, havaya, including the matter, the worthy relation to the matter whose peak is man, and the worthy relation to the undefined God. Accordingly, the laws of the faithful logic must coincide with the scientific and moral truths, not due to them being a starting point, but since they are part of the faithful logical essence. When we read about the morality of the prophets of Israel, we witness a morality learned within the framework of an imprinted, intuitive, revelatory understanding of the connection with the undefined God in which it is included. A morality which is objective in its ultimate purpose. Indeed, as the emphasis of Leibowitz, it is not love thy neighbor as thyself alone, but love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord. Ani Hashem. This is a rule regarding what is worthy toward the essence, necessarily including what is worthy toward the matter, and standing in one scale with the laws of the world of the is, Olam Hayesh. When we see in the Torah at the beginning of the book of Genesis the descriptions of the creation of the nature by the God, we see the preliminary stage of the faith, that the nature is an inseparable part of it, but clearly not its core of cores. All those attempts for checking the natural feasibility of the stories of the Torah whether in the aspect of their adaptation as themselves to the laws of nature, or findings for their existence in practice, such as archaeological findings and such like, are completely secondary TOEFL attempts to the Torah, and are not interesting at all from a faithful-logical perspective. These attempts, providing curiosity or commerce, teach on a prominent lack of understanding of the essence of the Torah, and of the essence of the faithful logical ultimate purpose of man, which is eternal and not dependent on anything. When we read, for example, about the miracles in the Torah, we learn that these are accompanying the beginning of the faith or the absence of the faith. The miracles teach us about early stages of the faith, about the bottom of the ladder from a faithful logical perspective. The miracles are parables at the level of the starting faith, as part of the material foundations of the faith, from which one must transcend and disconnect toward the discovery of the faithful logical laws of the worthy relation toward the essence, Havaya. A generation needing miracles is a generation of little faith, and a generation required to a logical faith is a generation treading in the paths of the truth. When we read that the people call, "We will do and we will hear," Na'aseh v'nishma, when God descends upon Mount Sinai, we do not witness the commandment of, "We will do and we will hear," but the preliminary stage of the faith, in relation to the collective, the people, versus an advanced stage in relation to the individual, who of course argues with his understanding of the God's trail, Shovalo, when he ascends the mountain. This matter is clarified to us distinctly in the act of the kaf of the collective, in the following after the matter, versus the acceptance of the 10 Commandments by the individual, and this after the declaration of the "We will do and we will hear." The faithful logical study of the Torah shows us that we must meditate in it day and night. We must advance from a preliminary stage of "We will do and we will hear," from a stage of rote and study, Talmud, to a stage of "We will think and we will do," Nachshov v'na'aseh, to a stage of understanding, to a stage of the study of the Torah. When we read about the faithful logical pioneers in the Torah like Abraham, Jacob, and Moses, versus Adam and Noah who preceded them, we see moments of argument in the connection with the God, moments of doubts, moments of hesitation, moments of struggle over the ascent in the ladder of truth. These are not moments of weakness. On the contrary, these are the moments of the faithful logic itself, characterized by argument, by thought, by recognition as part of its definitional nature, never ceasing forever. In contrast, there exist moments of faith that is not for its own sake, shelo lishma, characterizing the faith at its lower level. The parable of the second, "Go thee," lech lecha, on the way to the ascent, to the Lord, to the land of Moriah, on one of the mountains which I shall tell thee, versus the parable of the first, "Go thee," in which promises are given to Abraham on the way to the land which I shall show thee, is one of the wonderful parables upon which Leibowitz points time after time, on the way to the discovery of the faith for its own sake, lishma, which is not dependent on anything from the world of the is, olam hayesh. The faith of truth is for its own sake, simply because the truth is not relative and is not dependent on anything, just as the struggle for its discovery is eternal, necessary, and never decided forever by man. The thought pluralism does not stand in contradiction with the existence of the one truth, but it is situated in its unachievable, by definition, pursuit, requiring a supreme and constant thought freedom. As in the daily reality, we must require to the stories repeating in the Torah time after time after time, in their essence, while a difference in their objects, and an ascent of the degree of their moral nimshal in the ladder of the faithful logic. The legal development regarding the worthy relation between man to the God is spread before our eyes in the wonderful book of the Torah throughout its length and width, but our eye does not perceive its essence without a faithful logical research. The legal, faithful logical development in the book of the Torah teaches us on the faithful-logical need in a ceaseless thought process for the sustaining of the ultimate purpose of man, which is according to the formal and essential Leibowitz as one, the worship of God. From specific parables to general parables, to an exemplary understanding of their being parables, and to their exemplary understanding in their specific and inclusive context. This is the understanding of the inclusive picture, whose laws we must discover in each and every generation, in adaptation to the reality changing in it, and to what is forever not new under the sun, which is solely the trail, chevallo, of the one, undefined God. When we read about the commandments which are given to the people emerging from slavery to freedom, when it is still immersed by the nature of things in the connection to the paganism after 400 years of slavery in the pagan society, we must understand in a faithful, logical manner the process required for their development in adaptation to the changing reality, in which the faithful, logical, a priori concepts do not change. But the reality of man changes, and change it does. This process is learned from within another reading, new, old, faithful, logical, of the parables of the Torah, in the manner of a rational homiletic sense, darash, in relation to the development that preceded the development of the commandments of the literal sense, peshat, without detracting even one letter from the Torah. This is a faithful logical understanding, as distinguished from rote, of the biblical development laws between the commandments situated before our eyes in the Torah itself, in the narrative stages given to us in such a wonderful and eternal manner, and about which Maimonides sought to explain to us in the checking of the reasons of the specific commandments, ta'amei hamitzvot, as distinguished from the checking of the laws of their general development. Not the formal commandments for their time, but the commandments, the laws, and the judgments, in a faithful, logical manner, which is beyond such or another time, in relation to the existing and changing reality from the perspective of man. The non-esoteric clarifications of Maimonides regarding the correct, faithful logical process are spread throughout the length and width of his last great composition, The Guide for the Perplexed, which also must be examined in a faithful, logical manner. The sacrifices as an integration between a rebellion against the paganism, in which the cow and the sheep are considered as holy, to a gradual emergence from the paganism by means of a ritual physical connection in relation to the undefined God, which is a symbolic connection at its most primary level, mentioned already at the beginning of the book of Genesis. The parting of the Red Sea, as a prominent parable of the struggle against paganism, with which there are no compromises, just as there are no compromises in the laws of nature between a correct law and a half-correct one. For behold, the truth as itself is one, and there is none besides it, even though it as itself is forever not understood to us in its essence. The land as a means, and as a parable for matter, in which one must deepen and in its contexts, and forever not as an essence or as a value as itself. And indeed, one should not wonder at all regarding the decisive attacks of Leibowitz against the worship of the land, the soil, the messianism, and the idolatries of their kinds, in the aspect of the holiness of the matter, which is necessarily in the aspect of idolatry, and a most severe interpretive and religious error. All that is falsehood and idolatrous, be its earthly power, pharaonic, or other as it may be, behold, its judgment is one, to drown in the depths of the sea of truth. Truth, without any connection to an earthly and human obstacle. The truth is truth for its own sake. Lishma. Thus also one should not wonder when Maimonides states in an unmistakable manner that a day will come and the routine prayers might be unnecessary, and this since he necessarily identifies the improper foundation, to say the least, in turning the text into an essence which is embodiment, gashmiut, as itself.
as distinguished from a framework for a faithful logical thought, even without requiring to the content of prayers, which often embodies in practice the God. By the way, Leibowitz also required, in a loose, perhaps esoteric manner, to the subject of prayers, when he notes that there are in the prayers foundations that are not acceptable to him, but he accepts them as part of the yoke of Torah and commandments, with all the darash stating of that for our matter.
The worthy connection between man to the God is forever not a derivative of a canonical reading of a text in the aspect of see and sanctify, re'eh ve'kadesh. Its essence is situated in a supreme free thought in the paths of the truth, and in the action derived from this thought.
This connection, in its essence, is forever not a canonical action of mediators between the text to the reality, in the aspect of, we will do and we will hear, na'aseh v'nishma, and certainly not a following after the material descendants of those mediators, due to their being their descendants. The grave of Moses our teacher was not known, and his material descendants did not inherit him, not in the leadership of the people, nor in its spiritual leadership. This to be distinguished from the institution of the priesthood, kehunah, which was not an essential faithful institution, but a governmental framework only, of the descendants of his brother Aaron, who did not prevent the sin of the calf.
The worthy connection between man to God is first and foremost a connection of constant rational, logical thought, and an action beside it, situated in the hands of each individual and individual according to his ability, his will, and his persistence, in the tension between his material nature and his faithful logical ultimate purpose.
This is a connection including, by definition, constant logical skepticism, constant argument, constant struggle, except in the a priori fundamental concepts, in the aspect of the burning and unconsumed bush, and an action derived from its unrefuted conclusions at a given time of this thought.
Since I prove that the claim of Spinoza for the separation between the faith to the science is erroneous, according to his own method, and since I clarified what is the error of Kant both in the moral level and both in the faithful level, and out of a modern look regarding the guidance of Maimonides, the way is paved for a constant discovery of the exemplary, proven way, for progress toward the true universal worship of God. Between Maimonides to his negative student, Spinoza, can be identified a common rational point in the rejection of the Jewish halacha from there and in its correction from here, as far as it does not conduct itself in a rational, logical manner. This common point contradicts on its face the formal Leibowitz, who accepts the decision of the historical halacha regarding the interpretation of the commandments of the Torah as an axiom whose fulfillment constitutes, apparently, the ultimate purpose of man. Leibowitz recognizes that the Jewish halacha is human and recognizes in practice the need for a rational reference to the interpretation of the Torah. The critique of the existing halacha received in his work various expressions, among them most sharp toward its contemporary originators, toward its development as itself, such as its relation to the female sex, its relation to the land of Israel as a value, its erroneous relation to the rabbinate and to the separation of religion from state, and among them esoteric ones, such as his publicized immersion in the thought of Maimonides. And at the same time, Yeshayahu Leibowitz did not want, and perhaps could not, tread one additional step, a small step for the believing man, and a great one for the believing and non-believing humanity as a whole, and to draw the requested conclusion from this regarding the exemplary worship of God in relation to the Torah and its interpretation, and this without requiring here to the claim regarding the faithful, logical necessity to act according to the instructions of the Torah. This is the faithful logical step,
the synthetic step between the great moments of the theory of wisdom, reflected also in Aristotle from there, and Kant from here. At the same time, with the great moments of the faith meaning, the Torah, and the moments of its exemplary understanding, devoid of the mysticism embodied also in the thought of Maimonides. Indeed, every action of the thought is subject to the laws of nature, including a moral or interpretive decision, or faithful interpretive. But in this we include both the logical rational thought and both the mystical thought, accepting the yoke of some axiom and contradicting the exemplary reason without a blink of an eye. The built-in and correct opposition of Leibowitz to the Kabbalah occupying itself with what is outside of our recognition by definition obligates a different thought regarding his consistent claim concerning the ultimate purpose of man according to the fulfillment of 613 commandments, according to the adjudicated halakha. There is no doubt that this halakha did not develop according to rational analysis rules of exemplary proofs, but according to adjudications upon adjudications of individuals, which were made according to previous and current interpretation, from within disagreements, traditions, homilies, midrashim, legends, agadot, and social and even political reality. And this, among other things, according to what is stated in it itself. Even if we assume that these halachot, or part of them, were made for the sake of heaven, l'shem shamayim. For behold, there is in them, in generalization, no claim of divine revelation. Behold still, as I showed above, there is to interpret the claimed divine revelation and its interpretation in an exemplary, faithful, logical manner, disconnected from every legend and mysticism, and given to constant, faithful, logical refutation. The very being of the halachic decisions, human decisions, obligates by definition their error and their refutation. For behold, there is no man whatsoever entrusted with the truth, given as we opened this composition, solely to God, but not to man. But if the error of the faithful halakha is built in it, so is built in also the need for its correction, as far as we are occupied with the search after the truth, and not with the fulfillment of a specific tradition as itself. Every determination whatsoever of man, whether regarding the science or the morality or the faith, is by definition both rational and faithful, and therefore is given to refutation, and does not include the truth in its entirety. This claim is acceptable to Maimonides, who sees in an explicit manner that is unmistakable, to struggle against the development of the halakha until his time, and to decide between its decisors in a rational manner, known to him according to the development of the wisdom until his time. But despite his requiring to these decisions, he finds it worthy to require, at the peak of peaks of his action, to the writing of the Guide for the Perplexed, whose entire declared goal is a call for a rational interpretation of the book of the Torah and for the book of the prophecy, which did not come by the hand of Maimonides himself. This matter requires a darash, regarding the view of Maimonides about the correction required. For the worthy continuation of the religion in the paths of the truth, as distinguished from its state in his time, even after Mishnah Torah, which came out under his hand, versus the book of the prophecy, which did not come out. The interpretation of the Bible, according to the Guide for the Perplexed, must be carried out in an exemplary manner toward the goal of the constant and impossible to exhaust approach of man toward God. The immediate derivative from it is without any doubt a constant, faithful logical correction of the existing halakha, which forever, by definition, will not be correct in a perfect manner. Therefore, and accordingly, the formal claim of Leibowitz, according to which the ultimate purpose of man is the acceptance of the yoke of 613 commandments according to the interpretation of the Jewish halakha, is erroneous and refuted.
unless this halakha will be carried out according to the way of the exemplary proof, meaning the way of the faithful logic. Say from now that the position of the essential Leibowitz is that the ultimate purpose of man is the fulfillment of the commandments of the Torah according to the faithful rational halakha, which obligates, as the opinion of Maimonides, an exemplary proof of the way in which man must worship the undefined God. The existing halakha in every religion and in every faith, according to the essential Leibowitz, is forever not in the aspect of see and sanctify, except without question. On the contrary, every halakha, wherever it is, how much more so one that does not lean upon the way of the exemplary proof, is given to constant refutation, provided that this refutation will be carried out in an exemplary manner, in a faithful, logical manner. The worship of God, according to the essential Leibowitz, is necessarily the ultimate purpose of the existence of man, because it acts for the finding of the way of the paths of the truth, in which it is worthy that he act toward himself, toward other human beings, and toward the inclusive essence in a world in which God returned, but this time in a faithful, logical manner. This ultimate purpose, which forever will not be achieved in its fullness, is realized in actions according to a faithful logical interpretation, also and mainly of the book of the Torah, which is necessarily a new old halakha, as will be clarified now in a primary manner, in the concluding chapter of these reflections about the thought of Yeshayahu Leibowitz.